Hello, welcome to System Maintenance and Security chapter. Today in this chapter I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what can go wrong in terms of systems in a hospitality organization or tourism organization. So imagine that you are running a hotel. So the systems that you are going to use if you are a full service is about 65 different systems. Just think about it. Somebody is booking a hotel, so you are going to use reservation systems, right? If you are using an online travel agency versus your website, or somebody's picking up the phone and calling your call center, or walking into the hotel, or booking through a travel agency. All of these touch points uses a system. A system is defined as any technology that enables you to perform your functions efficiently, faster, cheaper, all of the above here. So, and then the person books the hotel. Imagine you are a lodging facility, and then comes to your hotel, checks in, and then goes into the restaurant, uses the spa, goes to the pool, all of these different things, goes into the restaurant, eats, etc. And you can imagine that every single touch point uses again a system. System could be a computer, or it could be a point of sale system. It could be a check-in, check-out system. It could be an electronic card system. You name it. Or when you go to a gift shop in a hotel that you are buying something, that you are going to use a system. Employees come and clock in. They are using a system. They are actually using security systems in the hotel. Or think about kitchen. All these different types of technologies, from walk-ins to the technology that detects the temperature in the walk-in. So, as you know, systems are everywhere in hospitality industry. We don't even talk about airline industry or travel agency industry or parks, etc. Every single. But when there are systems, things may go wrong. And we know this because of even in our personal lives, that I'm sure that you probably come across one day that your hard drive crashed or your computer crashed and you don't know what to do, you lost your data, etc. So when we look at these system failures, when the system fails, usually this happens because of one of these reasons that you see on the screen. One of them is operator error, hardware failure, the hard drive, the computer, the CPU fails, just simply fails. They have filled their shelf life and fails. Power problems is another one of the common causes of system failures. Software bug could be one of them, system overload, virus, or spyware. So let's talk about these in a little bit detail, and then we are going to close this chapter with the IT compliance, which includes payment card industry data security standards. When you think about power line, even in your homes, have you ever seen a picture like this in your life? If you did not, you're lucky. But if you have done, this is sometimes happen. The reason is simple, that the power that comes into this particular plug here is, if you live in America, it's about 110 volt. If you live in other parts of the world, Europe, for example, is 220 volts. The electricity that comes to your home, which to this plug then connects to your computer, your TV, whatever technological item that you're using, actually is ranging between 100 to 120. We say 110 because that's the average. It goes waves. Same thing with when it's 220, 200 to 240. When it is a particular certain range, is okay, nothing happens. But sometimes spikes occur, either lower or higher. This is when this burn happens. So power line trouble causes 70% of the hardware and software failures in organizations. Symptoms include burned components, garbled transactions, memory loss, corrupted data, lost data, and unexplained intermittent problems. Can we fix this? We can fix it by using UPS, uninterrupted power supply. And UPSs really are wonderful. As a matter of fact, right now in this computer that I'm recording this lecture, I am using a UPC because I'm using a desktop computer, and sometimes power can even just black out for a second, and I will just go on. But UPC, uninterrupted power supply, is actually going to help to maintain that steady the voltage so that you don't have a power problem in this one. Software bug is another one, as we have said. This, I mean, the picture here is a bug, but it's really not an actual bug. So it's a bug means that it's a logic error in the program preventing it from working properly. In one hospitality accounting programs used to abort if the user forgets to turn on the printer before printing on a financial statement. It does happen. This is usually not really a big deal, because when this happens, the software companies usually releases an update or patch which fixes the problem. So this is one of the least that I am personally concerned of. System overload is another reason why systems fail. Too many demands on a computer can greatly diminish its performance and may cause system failure. I don't know if you ever seen this screen, the picture that you see here on the slide in your computer, but if not, it is quite common, especially when in a server, the server capacity is limited, and then you just keep adding more things to that particular server or computer, and then you get this error. Fixes is also adding memory, adding hard drive, adding computer power in terms of RAM or ROM that can fix the problem. Viruses is another one. In today's world, where a lot of people are talking about the pandemic that is going on with coronavirus, that this is different than that, although it's kind of similar in some terms. It's contagious. It goes from one computer to another, just like a human virus would do it. It is also damageful, just like the other human virus could be. It destroys or changing the program. Usually it has a bad intentions, whoever is doing them. The carrier of a virus is a program that appears legitimate, called a Trojan Horse. And what are the differences between them? Let's see here. Now we can see between viruses, malware, Trojans, ransomware, spyware, and worms. There are quite a few different system failure reasons here. Let's watch this.
Viruses, worms, Trojans, and bots are all part of a class of software called malware. The overwhelming majority of malware is created to make money illegally, often by stealing sensitive and confidential information from victims' computers and mobile devices. Malware can also be used for cyber vandalism, cyber espionage, hacktivism, cyber warfare, and various other reasons. Malware can make entry onto your computer via questionable file downloads, visiting infected websites, or through email containing a seemingly benign link or attachment. Common types of malware. Viruses. Almost all viruses are attached to an executable file, which means the virus may exist on a system but will not spread until a user opens the infected program. Viruses often originate on the internet and spread when downloading a file infected with a virus, peer-to-peer file sharing, or email attachment. Trojan. A Trojan is a harmful piece of software that looks legitimate. Users are typically tricked into leading and executing it on their systems. Trojans can not only steal your sensitive data, they can also give cyber crooks access to your system. Trojans are employed to gain access to your computer's financial and personal information. Ransomware. Ransomware holds your PC hostage and demands money. It locks up your computer, threatening to destroy data, demanding ransom or a payment for release of your data, files, or to regain the ability to use your computer again. spyware. Spyware secretly gathers private information about the user activity, such as internet usage, and logs keystrokes via the process of keylogging to steal passwords and other sensitive data. Worms. Worms can replicate themselves and infect multiple computers on a network, causing major damage. Network worms often use computer networks to spread, slowing down traffic and relying on security failures such as outdated operating systems and no antivirus programs installed. In contrast, viruses require the spreading of an infected host file. Worms are a standalone software and do not require a host or human help to spread. The best way to protect your system from malware is to keep your operating system clean by downloading regular patches, updates, and making sure that your...
What to do in a virus attack? If that happens, obviously, the first thing is not to get a virus attack. You can do this by using antivirus, anti-spyware, anti-malware. There are quite a few different options out there. But if you are affected with a virus in your system, what you need to do is these steps. Follow. Isolate and disconnect that affected computer immediately. Disconnect means, isolate means, just like in a human virus, what do we do when we have a virus? We just go try to stay away from other people so we don't give it to them. Same thing when there is a virus in a computer. You isolate that computer, unplug from the network, remove the virus, restore your data, prevent future infection by utilizing antivirus software, and learn from mistakes. I would like to share with you a couple of the studies that I personally have conducted with restaurants and hotels in terms of their security. And this studies are has been done in about 10 years ago, but they are still very valid. As a matter of fact, if you were to look at today's problems with restaurants and hotels in terms of network security, you are seeing still the very similar issues today, even though these studies that I've done was quite old. In that study, when I did it with restaurant technology, this is the study itself, payment card industry data security standards compliance in restaurants. 24% of the restaurant networks had a computer attack within the last 12 months. Today, this particular statistics is probably the same, if not more. On average, restaurants received 1 to 5 network attacks within the last 12 months. And again, this article was published in 2010, me and my students and a colleague of mine. And this is another one that these part of the slides come from, to be secure or not to be. This is from the hotel side, the same article that study that I've done for the restaurants. This is for the hotels. But let's look. This is for the hotels, and what you see here is different tools and techniques that you can use to prevent, to protect you from network attacks. What can you do? Antivirus software. Look at this. Again, this statistics is not really relevant. Maybe this is more or less. As a matter of fact, we just did this study in 2020, just recently, and we have found, as a matter of fact, I will probably share that with you as well as an article, and you can see very similar things. Antivirus software, only 73% of the hotels are using it, which needs to be 100%. Physical security. Physical security means that protecting the computers in a physical place, lock them up so that other people don't get it. Software, firewall, access control. These firewalls are imagined like a bouncer in a bar. When you go to a bar, there's a bouncer who usually looks at your ID. If your age is eligible, legal, that let you go in. Same thing. This firewall, hardware or software, allows do the same thing. They actually check to see if you are authorized to go into that network. Imagine that I'm a hotel or restaurant, somebody wants to send an information to me. That bouncer, which is the firewall, checks, are you authorized to go in here? If yes, allows them. So that's kind of like checks. Or you can maybe create the analogy of a door in your home. You lock your door. before anybody comes, you look from the peephole to see that if that person is supposed to be inside your home. If he or she is, then you unlock the door, let this person in. Firewall does exactly the same. Access control, similarly, giving access to people, to files and systems that they need to have access. You will not just let anybody go into your system and download all the credit cards that you have processed from your guests. Encrypted files. Encryption is interesting. I'm going to explain that with this video in a second, what it means.
Encryption is the process of taking a message and scrambling its contents so that only certain people can look at your message. There are two types of encryption: symmetric and asymmetric encryption. Let's first take a look at symmetric encryption to understand why asymmetric encryption was created. To do that, let me introduce you to Alice and Bob. Alice has a sensitive document that she wants to share with Bob. She uses an encryption program to protect her document with a password or passphrase that she chooses. She then sends the encrypted document to Bob. However, Bob cannot open this message because he doesn't know the passphrase that Alice used to encrypt the document. In other words, he doesn't have the key to open the lock. Now comes a real problem. How does Alice share this passphrase securely with Bob? Sending it through email is risky because others might find the passphrase and use it to decrypt any messages between Alice and Bob. This is exactly the kind of problem that asymmetric encryption intends to solve. It is comparable to a mailbox on the street. The mailbox is exposed to anyone who knows its location. We can say that the location of the mailbox is completely public. Anyone who knows the address can go to the mailbox and drop in a letter. However, only the owner of the mailbox has a key to open it up and read the messages. So let's now go back to technical details. When using asymmetric encryption, both Alice and Bob have to generate a key pair on their computers. A popular and secure way for doing this is by using the Rsa algorithm. This algorithm will generate a public and private key that are mathematically linked to each other. Public keys can be used to encrypt data, and only the matching private key can be used to decrypt it. Even though the keys are linked together, they cannot be derived from each other. In other words, if you know someone's public key, you cannot derive his private key. If we retake our mailbox example, then the mailbox's address would be the public key, something that everyone is allowed to know. The owner of the mailbox is the only one who has the private key, and that is needed to open up the mailbox. Let's now take a look at how Alice and Bob can use asymmetric encryption to communicate securely with each other. They start by exchanging their public keys. Bob gives his public key to Alice, and Alice gives her public key to Bob. Now Alice can send her sensitive document again. She takes the document and encrypts it with Bob's public key. She then sends the file to Bob, who uses his private key to unlock the document and read it. Because they use asymmetric encryption, only Bob is able to decrypt the message. Not even Alice can decrypt it because she doesn't have Bob's private key. The strength and security of the asymmetric encryption now relies on Alice and Bob to keep their private keys well protected. If an attacker steals Alice's private key, it can be used to decrypt all messages that are intended for Alice. However, the attacker cannot decrypt messages that were sent by Alice because that requires Bob's private key. Asymmetric encryption is used in a lot of places where security really matters. You might not be aware of it, but every time you visit a secure website via HTTPS, you're actually using asymmetric encryption. It's also being used to securely send emails with the PGP protocol. And one last example, Bitcoin also uses asymmetric encryption to make sure that only the owner of a money wallet can withdraw or transfer money from it. So now you know how asymmetric encryption works and what the differences are between asymmetric and symmetric encryption.
PCMCI is actually a physical card that you enter a slot that you enter a card to be able to access a particular system function. Encrypted logins is to be able to log into your systems by using encryption. Actually, now that you know what encryption is, so that you understand better. Reusable passwords, so it allows the passwords to be able to change after a particular certain time, so that people don't utilize the same password for a long time. Intrusion detection system is the software that allows, if anybody goes into your network that is not authorized, alerts the IT staff. Vulnerability assessment scan is another software tool that allows you to see if there is any open holes. Imagine this, that you're checking a physical check in your home. Is all the windows locked, all the doors locked? Same idea. If not, you will close them. Image service, but basically what it does is that it actually creates a exact copy of your server in an offsite by using network tools. It can be real time, or it can be, let's say that you're in a hotel check-in check-out system. So if you were to create an image server at another location, every 1 hour, or even real time, when somebody checks in, it will process it in your current server on site and multiply, copy that in another one. The whole idea is that if something happens to your server on site, you can actually kick in the image server immediately, so your business will continue as usual. So it's a business continuity tool. Internet Security System Scanner, again, as the description describes, is this Internet Security System Scanner. Digital IDs, biometrics are the other tools that are used by hotels. Same thing applies to the restaurants, or for that matter, actually, you can take these tools and techniques applied to any kind of business. Doesn't have to be restaurant or hotel. Backup. What is backup? Backup is to be able to create a backup, just like in this slide we were talking about the image servers. If you don't have an image server, you would maybe have a backup in terms of a tape maybe, or a CD, or another place, or secondary storage that you would just back up every, for example, frequency, at least once a day. That's what we are saying. Some hotels do it every 4 hours. Some hotels actually do it if they have an image server real time. As things happen, it copies itself. Backup method is determined by the technology you have. It could be tapes, you could have CDs, optical, or you can even use SAN, Storage Area Network. It's on the cloud, so you can back up on the cloud. And if you're using tapes, for example, actual tapes, you want to store them, rotate them. You would have a Monday tape, Tuesday tape, Wednesday tape. The reason is that if one of the tapes is broken and you need to go back, you will not lose everything. Maybe you will lose 1 or 2 days, but not. Hard copy refers that some hotels, this is for hotels, they actually print what they call emergency report every 4 hours that has the list of the guests check-in, check-out, and the people in-house. In case something happens to your computers, you can still actually run the hotel with this particular emergency report. Computer security problems, the keyboard can actually be utilized as a security stealing tool, and this is keylogger. Keylogger software can be installed to your keyboard like here, and as you type this in things, it will record, and then whoever is doing that can actually download and get it over. Biometric technology can also have some problems, especially with fingerprint, the internet communication lines, and physical address of the computers as well. Okay, so the next part of this particular lecture talks about IT compliance. Keeping IT systems in line with local, state, national, and international laws, but not only laws, regulations, standards, and policies. What do we mean by this? If you are operating in Europe, you need to obey the European, if you're in European Union laws, regulations, standards, and policies. If you live in, if you work in your hotel, restaurant, or whatever is in France or Germany, that country, particular state, local, all the way to. If you are, for example, accepting credit card, you have to obey some of the policies, which we're going to talk in the next bullet here. Here, the payment card industry data security standards. And I want to explain that to you, what that means, but it is a consortium of credit card issuing brands. They came together. They actually created some policies that all merchants are hotels, restaurants, travel agencies, airlines that accept credit cards, to obey. Why did they do this? Because many times credit card numbers are stolen and used for illegal reasons, and they were tired of them, so they actually want the merchants, the companies that accept credit cards, to take a responsibility. And how do they do it? Here's how it is explained in this short video.
What is the Pci-Dss? The Payment Card Industry Data Security Standard, or Pci-Dss, was developed to encourage and enhance cardholder data security, and to facilitate the broad adoption of consistent data security measures globally. It applies to all merchants and service providers that process, transmit, or store cardholder data. If your organization handles card payments, it must comply, or risk suffering financial penalties, or even the withdrawal of the facility to accept card payments. The Pci-Dss was launched in 2004 and is the result of collaboration between the major credit card brands American Express, Discover, JCB, MasterCard, and Visa. Do I need to comply with the Pci-Dss? All organizations that accept credit and debit cards, or that store, process, and/or transmit cardholder data, need to comply with the standard. Merchants and service providers' compliance requirements differ depending on a number of factors, including the size of the organization and the volume of transactions it undertakes. The criteria that a merchant or service provider have to meet are set by the individual payment brands, each of which has its own compliance program. What are the penalties for non-compliance? The Pci-Dss is a standard, not a law. It's enforced through contracts between merchants, acquiring banks, and payment brands. Each payment brand can fine acquiring banks for Pci-Dss compliance violations, and acquiring banks can withdraw the ability to accept card payments from non-compliant merchants. It's also worth remembering that a Pci-Dss breach is always a GDPR breach, as cardholder data is classified as personal data under the regulation. So, as well as any enforcement action from your acquiring bank, your organisation could face administrative fines of up to 20 million euros, currently nearly 18 million pounds, or 4% of annual global turnover, whichever is greater, under the GDPR. How to become Pci-Dss compliant. The Pci-Dss specifies 12 requirements that are organised into 6 control objectives. 1. Build and maintain a secure network. Install and maintain a firewall configuration to protect cardholder data. Do not use vendor-supplied defaults for system passwords and other security parameters. 2. Protect cardholder data. Protect stored cardholder data. Encrypt transmission of cardholder data across open public networks. 3. Maintain a vulnerability management program. Use and regularly update antivirus software or programs. Develop and maintain secure systems and applications. 4. Implement strong access control measures. Restrict access to cardholder data by business need to know. Assign a unique ID to each person with computer access. Restrict physical access to cardholder data. 5. Regularly monitor and test networks. Track and monitor all access to network resources and cardholder data. Regularly test security systems and processes. 6. Maintain an information security policy. Maintain a policy that addresses information security for employees and contractors. Compliance with the standard is notoriously complicated, and many organizations fail to maintain their compliance. Verizon's 2018 Payment Security Report found that nearly half, 47.5%, of organizations it assessed for interim PCI-DSS compliance had failed to maintain all security controls. First, it's necessary to determine your merchant level and whether you need to submit a self-assessment questionnaire, SAQ, and if so, which one, or a report on compliance, ROC. There are several types of SAQ, each of which has different requirements. Some require internal and external vulnerability scans and regular penetration testing. An ROC, on the other hand, must be conducted by a PCI Qualified Security Assessor, QSA, who will issue a formal report to the PCI Security Standards Council to attest that your organization is in full compliance with the standard. Whatever your requirements, a Pci-Dss Gap Analysis is a useful first step to determine your organization's current compliance levels and outline the specific steps needed to achieve full compliance with the standard. It includes a detailed review of compliance activities such as on-site interviews with key staff, an assessment of the in-scope system components and configurations, and a physical and logical data flow analysis, in addition to examining out-of-scope components.
You know, when you look at the industries from the data compromise, stealing the data, you know, they're not going to steal the names of your guests. They are, you know, the hackers are not really interested in the names, or if the people who stayed in your hotel, ate in your restaurant, male or female, their age. They don't really care about that data. That's not useful to them. What they want is credit card data, the data that they can actually turn that into money. So if you look at the different industries, 17% of retail industry is affected by data compromise hackers, 13 is financial insurance, and 12% of hospitality. And 40% of the breaches targeted payment card data. That's the credit card data. And 22% goes into the magnetic stripe. That's the all credit cards. And 18% card not present, meaning that the hotels, restaurants, or other institutions actually process the data when the person doesn't have the physical card, maybe online, maybe on the phone, etc. Credit card breaches in the hospitality industry, as we said, is everywhere. If you just do Google credit card breach in hotels or restaurants, travel agencies, you are going to find many. This is from 2016, but it was a big deal. Starwood, Marriott, Hyatt hotels exposing cards. This is from Omni hotels. Again, one after another. There's just so many examples of this. Unfortunately, it didn't stop before. It's probably not going to stop at all. How do credit cards work? Who is involved in when somebody pays with a credit card? Let's just hear about this.
Are you having trouble understanding your merchant account? Are you confused about the rates and fees and how you're being charged? If so, this video will explain how it all works. You don't need to know every little detail about credit card processing. You just need to know enough to delegate the task to a provider that'll take care of everything for you. Nevertheless, it's important to understand the fundamentals so that you can properly make a provider selection. In the next couple of minutes, we'll discuss the merchant account transaction cycle and how it works, interchange and its role in the process, the two main pricing structures and how they compare to each other, and at the end, I'll give you a couple ideas on how to best select a provider that fits your needs. Let's look at the transaction cycle. First, the customer presents a card to the merchant for purchase of goods or services. After the card is swiped or entered into the point-of-sale software, the processor sends out for authorization through the payment processing network. The issuing bank approves or declines the transaction based on funds available. The transaction is then passed through the electronic networks to the processor, and the approval code is delivered to the point-of-sale device at the merchant location. The issuing bank then sends the money to the processing company to reimburse them for the purchase that was made. This whole process is completed in just a matter of seconds. At the end of the day, the merchant will send out all of their transactions, referred to as a batch, to the processor for monies to be deposited into the merchant bank account. And finally, the issuing bank will send the cardholder a bill for the purchase. What is interchange and what role does it play? Interchange is a schedule of fees that determine the price for all credit card transactions. There are hundreds of interchange levels, and each is comprised of a set of qualification requirements that must be met in order for a transaction to fall into a certain category. The two main qualification requirements are, number one, how the payment is accepted, whether it's face-to-face or over the phone, for example. And the second is the type of card that is used, whether it's a consumer card or a business card, for example. Individual rate categories are set by Visa and MasterCard, and the interchange schedule of fees are published and could potentially change 2 times per year. This is important to remember since those changes can affect the cost of your merchant account. Here's a sample of just one part of a schedule of fees published by Visa. As you can see, there are 13 rates and 8 categories on this example alone. Again, in any single transaction, just one of these rates are charged based on the qualification of the card that was presented. Let's look at 2 main pricing models and the components of both of them. Most providers will offer the following price structures. Number 1, tiered pricing, also known as bundled or bucket pricing. And the second is Interchange Plus, also known as Cost Plus or Pass-Through pricing. In order to compare these 2 pricing models, let's first look at how the 2 pricing structures are related. First off, interchange costs are at the core of both pricing models. The fees for any given transaction are broken down into 2 main categories: interchange costs, along with dues and assessments, and processor costs. Dues and assessments are paid to the card networks, which is Visa and MasterCard, and are the same for everyone as are interchange costs. They are absolute, and every processing company pays the same amount for interchange, dues, and assessments, period. They cannot be changed or discounted for special situations or for any reason, so whether you're a Fortune 500 company processing billions of dollars each year or a hobby business with just a couple $1,000s in volume, you pay the same fees. From now on, when I refer to interchange, it is assumed that dues and assessments are included since we understand that they are the same for everyone. The processor cost is the one variable that differs from one processor to the next and is the only area open for negotiation in your search for a merchant account provider. Here's both pricing models in detail. Your choices are tiered pricing or Interchange Plus. Tiered pricing takes hundreds of interchange categories and lumps them into bundles or buckets. The 3 common tiers are qualified, mid-qualified, and non-qualified, and as you can see from the chart, the rates increase as you move from qualified to non-qualified. Each of these tiers are set and assigned a specific rate by the processing company and can vary from one provider to the next. In fact, they often do. What is considered to be a qualified transaction with provider A might fall into a mid-qualified transaction with provider B. Tier pricing sorts the hundreds of interchange categories, and each tier is priced high enough to cover the average of all of the rates and fees that fall under that tier. Interchange Plus pricing passes the actual interchange costs through to you, and a small provider charge is charged in addition. Also referred to as provider markup, this fee varies widely based on a variety of factors and can range from 5 basis points up to 1.5% or even higher. Here's a sample transaction. Refer to the Visa interchange chart that we looked at earlier, and let's compare a single transaction at a qualified rate of 1.79 under a tier-based program to an Interchange Plus pricing program with a processor cost of 20 basis points. Assume the following for the transaction. The interchange cost is 1.65% plus a 10-cent transaction fee, and we'll use a $100 transaction as the sample dollar amount. Given those 2 variables, we know that the actual cost of the transaction is $1.75. For the Interchange Plus pricing model, you have a 20 basis point provider cost added to the $1.75 actual cost, bringing the total to $1.95. For the tier-based pricing model, you have that same base cost of $1.75, but in order to get the total cost for a tier-based pricing model, you simply multiply the $100 times the 1.79% rate assigned to that tier level to get the $1.79 total cost. As you can see, interchange cost is at the core of each of these pricing models, and with any pricing model for that matter, and is paid one way or another. So in this example, you can see that with the Interchange Plus pricing model, your total cost is $1.95 compared to the $1.79 with the tier-based model. In either example, you can see that only a small piece of the total fee is paid to the processor, as most of the fee is sent back to the issuing bank. Provider costs are collected for the purpose of paying network fees and other general business costs, such as administrative expenses associated with account servicing, application approval, and costs related to licensing the electronic payment networks. For each transaction, this same calculation is done depending on the pricing model that you're currently paying. It's widely assumed that interchange plus pricing is a better pricing model because it's said to have a true cost or a transparent pricing model, but does not necessarily mean that it's a lower overall cost. Variables such as average ticket and the number of transactions processed each month, in addition to the pricing structure variables that we discussed already, determine whether tier or interchange plus pricing is best for your company. Merchant account pricing is not one size fits all. In the end, what matters the most is the total dollar amount in fees paid for accepting a certain dollar amount of credit card volume. If you're interested in more tips, advice, and ideas on how to best structure your retail or e-commerce merchant account, head over to bankcardsales.com and look for the definitive merchant account guide.
And payment card industry data security standards. As we have said earlier, PCI, that's the council, which is comprised of the major credit card brands, tells every hotel, restaurant, company that accept a credit card, even if you accept one credit card, you must do these things. They say that you must obey these security standards. There are 12 of them. Install and maintain a firewall. Remember firewall we talked earlier? That's the bouncer, that's the door into your product cardholder data. They always use the cardholder data, protect cardholder data. That means that, you know, John goes to your hotel, gives the credit card, checks into your hotel, eats at the restaurant, and checks out. When he or she gives that credit card, the number, the expiration date, the CVC code, card verification code on the back of the credit card is what they are talking about protecting, because that's where the hackers are after. Do not use vendor supplied defaults for system password. This is so simple. When you buy a computer system, it comes with a username password, which is provided by the vendor. Logic says that change that password, because everybody knows. You know, if you buy a point of sale system from Micros come with the vendor supplied defaults, which is admin. Username is admin, password is admin. If you buy a point of sale system, if you don't change it, if I'm a hacker, what is the first thing I'm gonna do to hack into your system? I'm gonna use that username password. If you didn't change it, I'm gonna get access very easily and I'm gonna steal all the information there. So that's the second one. Just read all these 12. Protect stored cardholder data. Encrypt transmission. We learned about encryption earlier. Use and update antivirus software. Do you remember in the statistics, the research study that I've done, I showed you that only 75% of the hotels use antivirus software. Restaurants are no different than hotels. You gotta do it to protect your systems. Develop, maintain secure systems is number 6. 7 is restrict access to cardholder data by business need to know. What that means is that if Jane comes to my hotel and checks in and her card is given to the front desk clerk, does the dishwasher in the restaurant of the hotel need to know that credit card information? The answer is no. Do the bellboy need to know that credit card information? The answer is no. So this particular policy talks about the whoever needs to know. The front desk clerk is going to see it. They need to know to be able to process it. That's okay. But other people should not see or have access to credit card data. That's what number 7 talks about. Number 8, assign a unique ID to each person with a computer access. If there are 3 people working in the front desk, each of them must have a unique username and password. Restrict physical access to cardholder data. If my server is in the back room, that should not be accessible by everybody. That needs to be locked. Number 10, track and monitor all access to network resources and cardholder data. Just descriptive. Regular test security system processes. Same thing. And number 12 is maintain a policy that addresses information security for all personnel. So hotels, restaurants, any company, doesn't have to be hotel, restaurant, any company that accepts credit card must obey these rules. If they don't, and if they are hacked, they are liable. Is big amounts of fines is waiting for them. As a matter of fact, some restaurants and hotels even go out of business because of this. EMV card reader is a newer technology. It's called chip and pin also. Chip is this one, what you see here. Pin is what the 6-digit number that protects that particular. And I would like to show you this with this short video, the chip card.
Picture this, a computer that is 1/4 the size of a postage stamp, embedded in your credit card. That new technology is here. It's called a chip card. What makes a chip card different from a traditional credit card is the chip card is dynamic. It creates a new code for each transaction, and that makes it more secure. Magnetic strip cards contain static or unchanging data. With the chip card, the number changes every time it's used. That makes it nearly impossible for a fraudster to create a counterfeit card that can be used at an in-store merchant. Chip cards are easy to use, but a little different. Instead of swiping it, you insert the card into the terminal and leave it there until the end of the transaction. The terminal will prompt you to remove your card when your transaction is complete. This is called card dipping.
Like chips and dip? Not exactly, but pass the guacamole.
Even if the terminal is not chip enabled, you can still use your chip card. Chip cards also contain a traditional magnetic strip on the back, so you can use it whenever chip terminals are not available. Does the chip card require a signature and PIN number? Maybe. Some merchants may choose to bypass signatures and PIN numbers for smaller transactions. But whenever you use your card as a debit or at the ATM, you will need to enter your PIN number. So who assumes liability for fraud on a chip card? Almost always it's the financial institution. In some cases, the merchant is responsible. Just remember, whether you have a new chip card or traditional card, you will never be liable for fraud. At Mountain America, we know how important security is to you. We use the latest technology to build innovative products with you in mind, because we get the big picture.
And the benefits of this technology is difficult to counterfeit, protect against point-of-sale breaches, PIN assistance when users' cards are stolen. The chip technology uses an encrypted two-factor authentication. So this concludes this part of the lecture. Thank you for listening. Have a wonderful day.